That night, I stood there, stunned, as my sister and her fiancé laughed at me. I felt the weight of years of being overlooked, ignored, and made fun of. My suitcase lay in the street, wheels spinning, while people passing by barely noticed. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of one thing. They didn't control me. I had every right to be there, and I wasn't going to let their cruelty define me. I stepped back into the hotel lobby, my mind calm but sharp. I went straight to the front desk and quietly asked to confirm the reservations. Every room was under my name. Every payment made. Every detail arranged. My sister and Blaze had assumed I was powerless, that I would beg, cry, or embarrass myself. But I didn't. I had spent months saving, planning, and taking responsibility for this trip, and now the tables were ready to turn. I called the concierge over, and told them to make the rooms unavailable. No yelling. No dramatic gestures. Just a simple statement of fact. I watched from the side as confusion hit my sister's face. Her smile faltered, and Blaze's grin disappeared. I stayed silent, letting them feel the weight of their own arrogance. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the weak one. I had control, and I intended to use it wisely. That night, I walked past them calmly, carrying my dignity like a shield. I didn't need revenge through anger. I had something stronger. I had proof that I mattered, and that my presence, even if ignored for years, had power. By the time they realized what had happened, the moment was gone. I didn't look back. I had learned something important. Sometimes walking away quietly, with everything in your hands, is the loudest statement you can make. Delaney had always had a way of making me feel responsible for her happiness, and this time was no different. She called me weeks before the weekend, her voice soft and pleading, telling me about her dream engagement at the Ashford Grand. She painted a picture of candlelit dinners, luxury suites, and a celebration that would make everyone remember her forever. She said she couldn't do it without me, and I believed her. I worked extra hours and saved every penny I could. I wanted to see her happy, even if it meant stretching myself thin. I booked the suites, arranged the private dinner, and organized the transportation. I handled every little detail so that when the weekend arrived, she could walk in and feel like a queen. Blaze didn't have to lift a finger. Delaney assured me she would pay me back after the wedding, and I trusted her. I always did. When the night came, I watched her walk into the hotel laughing with Blaze, smiling like she owned the world. I carried my luggage behind them, feeling both pride and unease. Something about the way she glanced at me, almost dismissively, made my stomach twist. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves. But inside, a small warning bell rang, one I chose to ignore. I reminded myself that I had done this out of love and family duty. I wanted her to have her dream, even if it meant I stayed in the background. I had no idea that the moment I handed over control, she and Blaze would use it against me. The trust one placed in her, the effort I poured in, became the stage for the humiliation that awaited me outside the hotel entrance. By the time they pushed me and laughed, every favor, every sacrifice, felt like it had been used as a weapon. I realized that kindness without boundaries can make you vulnerable. And I wasn't about to stay vulnerable forever. As we walked into the hotel lobby, I felt that familiar sting of being invisible, the same one I'd carried since childhood. Delaney had always loved turning me into the joke. No matter what I achieved or how hard I worked, somehow it was never enough. At the dinner that night, she didn't even try to hide it. She started with little jabs, making fun of my job as if it were meaningless. Then my clothes, still wearing that old jacket? She laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her eyes sparkled with amusement at my discomfort, and the people around the table joined in without hesitation. Even our cousin Tamsin Rowe, who usually stayed neutral, chuckled at her comments. Every laugh felt like another weight pressing down on me, reminding me of all the times I had been pushed aside, dismissed, or ignored. I kept my voice low, trying not to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. But inside, a mix of anger and hurt grew stronger with each joke. I realized that the luxury weekend I had painstakingly planned and paid for wasn't a celebration. It had become a stage for my humiliation. Every detail I arranged, every effort I made, was overlooked while they turned me into entertainment. And yet, beneath the hurt, A small voice inside me began to rise. I could let this continue, let them control the moment. Or I could take control myself. That voice whispered that I had more power than they realized. That the effort and care I'd poured into everything could become my strength instead of my weakness. By the time dessert came, I was already plotting, not with anger, not with yelling, but with the quiet, careful knowledge that I could turn this night around, and when I did, they would finally understand the consequences of underestimating me. As we stepped outside, the night air felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just the chill of humiliation. Delaney turned to me, her smile sharp and cruel. "You're embarrassing the vibe," she said, as if my presence was a joke she had every right to punchline. Before I could react, she shoved me. Hard. My heel snapped under the force, and I stumbled. My suitcase tumbled to the ground, spilling my carefully packed clothes across the pavement. I froze for a moment, shock rooting me in place. Around us, Blaze and Tamsin laughed as if this was some kind of entertainment. People passing by glanced, some with curiosity, some with indifference. I felt small, exposed, and foolish. But something inside me refused to break. Pain shot through my foot, but it was nothing compared to the sting in my chest. All the planning, all the work, all the sacrifices I had made, the weekend, the dinners, the luxury suites, none of it mattered to them. To Delaney, it was a chance to humiliate me, to prove that I would always be the weaker one. I looked at them, their laughter ringing in my ears, and something shifted. This wasn't about my broken heel or the tipped suitcase. It was about respect, about showing them that I wasn't someone to push around. I bent down, picked up my things carefully, and brushed off the street dust, keeping my expression calm. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't even look angry. I just straightened up, feeling a new strength settle in my chest, the kind that comes when you realize the power to change a situation is in your hands, not theirs. That shove, that laugh, that moment, they thought it defined me. They had no idea it had just awakened something far stronger. I felt the eyes of Delaney and Blaze on me as I stood there, my suitcase in hand, but I didn't give them the reaction they wanted. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned and walked back inside the hotel lobby, my steps calm and deliberate. The valet waited, confused, and the people around us glanced at the commotion. But I ignored them all. I approached the front desk, my voice steady, and asked one simple question. "Are all the reservations under my name?" The clerk looked at me, a little surprised by the calm in my tone, and checked the system. Every single room, every suite, every deposit, it was all under my name. For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of power. I realized that the entire weekend, every detail, every plan I had worked so hard on, was mine to control. They had assumed I would beg, apologize, or stumble in humiliation. They had no idea that I had the authority to decide what happened next. Delaney and Blaze were still outside, laughing and talking to each other, completely unaware of the shift in power. I could feel their confidence faltering, even if they didn't yet realize why. I stood there, quiet, composed, letting the truth sink in. The control had always been mine. This was the moment I made my choice. I could let them continue to humiliate me, or I could act. I didn't need to yell or make a scene. The simple truth, backed by facts, was enough. I had spent months planning, saving, and handling every detail. Now the decision of what would happen next rested entirely in my hands. I knew that when I acted, they would understand that I was not someone to be pushed around or laughed at. The manager nodded as he confirmed what I already suspected. Every suite, every deposit, every single detail of the weekend, it was all under my name. My card had paid for everything. My signature was on every confirmation. The responsibility, the control, the power, it was entirely mine. I felt a strange calm settle over me. All those months of planning, saving, and sacrificing suddenly gave me a quiet authority. Delaney and Blaze had thought they could humiliate me, push me around, and I would crumble. But the truth was clear. The weekend, the luxury, the experience, they couldn't touch it without me. I held the keys, the access, the power. The shift hit me slowly, like the first light of dawn breaking through darkness. I wasn't the one embarrassed, I wasn't powerless, and I wasn't invisible. For years, I had let their words and jokes define me, but not tonight. Tonight, The situation had flipped completely. I could see it already, even without saying a word. The manager's confirmation was enough to make my sister pause, to make Blaze hesitate, though they were still outside, unaware of the change. Their confidence, built on my assumed weakness, was crumbling. I realized that this power wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about control, about showing that I could decide the outcome. I had worked hard, planned carefully, and I wasn't going to let their arrogance dictate the night. Standing there, listening to the manager verify everything, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The tables had turned, and the evening no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. Every laugh they had shared at my expense would now meet the consequences of their own assumptions. I didn't need to shout or confront them. The power in my hands was enough. Tonight I was no longer the joke. I was in control. I took a deep breath and made my move. Calmly, without raising my voice, I told the manager to cancel every reservation. Every suite, every dinner, every special arrangement. They were all to be voided immediately. There was no need for a scene, no need for drama. It was simply the hotel's policy, and I was the one in charge. The manager looked at me with a mixture of surprise and respect as he started processing the cancellations. My sister and Blaze were still outside, laughing and unaware that the night had already slipped from their control. I could feel the weight of every dollar I had spent, every careful plan I had made, transforming from vulnerability into quiet power. I stayed composed, steady, letting the cancellations happen without showing a flicker of emotion. I didn't want to gloat or shout. I didn't need to prove anything with words. The act itself was enough. Every room disappearing from their reach, every special request erased. It was all the statement they needed. When Delaney and Blaze finally stepped inside, their smiles faltered. Confusion and disbelief replaced the laughter they had worn so easily. They didn't know what had happened yet, and the realization would sting more because I hadn't made a scene. They had assumed I would react, cry, or beg. Instead, I had simply let the rules and my authority do the talking. It was a quiet victory, but it was absolute. The power had shifted entirely, and they were forced to face the consequences of underestimating me. I watched them struggle to understand, their confidence crumbling, and for the first time that night, I felt the calm satisfaction of someone who had finally taken control. Not with anger, but with composure. I had turned their night of mockery into a lesson they would not forget. By the time Delaney and Blaze finally walked into the hotel lobby, they were laughing, ready for the weekend they thought I had arranged for them. They imagined champagne waiting in their suites, the private dinners, the photos, all the luxury I had planned. But the moment they reached the front desk, the concierge looked at them politely and said, "I'm sorry, but all the rooms under this reservation are currently unavailable." Delaney froze. Her smile faltered, and the confident spark in her eyes vanished. Blaze blinked, confused, glancing between her and the concierge. "What do you mean unavailable?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. I stayed back, quietly watching, my suitcase beside me, feeling a calm satisfaction. I had not yelled, I had not announced anything. I hadn't needed to. The truth alone was enough. Every suite, every deposit, every detail. The power had always been in my hands. And now they were facing the reality of it. Delaney's face turned pale as she realized something had gone wrong, something she hadn't expected. She tried to hide her panic, to laugh it off, but the weight of her assumptions, the belief that I was powerless, that she could push me around, hit her all at once. Blaze's confident grin wavered, replaced by disbelief. It was in that moment I understood just how far the tables had turned. Their plans, their mockery, even their sense of control. It had all collapsed without a single shout from me. I felt a quiet power wash over me, knowing they were learning a lesson they had long ignored. Never underestimate someone you've treated as nothing. And in that silent, tense moment, I realized that sometimes, the strongest revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, precise, and completely unavoidable. Blaze's frustration finally boiled over. He stepped forward, voice sharp, demanding answers from the concierge. "This doesn't make any sense. How can all the rooms be unavailable? We paid for this weekend." His anger filled the lobby, drawing curious glances from other guests. The staff remained calm, professional. They explained politely but firmly that every reservation, every payment, and every deposit was under my name. As the cardholder, I had the authority to revoke access. There were no exceptions. They repeated it carefully, making sure Blaze and Delaney understood that this wasn't a mistake or a glitch. It was policy, and I had the control. Delaney's face turned red with embarrassment, and she tried to interject, to soften the situation, but Blaze was too proud, too confident in his assumed dominance. His demands only highlighted their ignorance. The lobby felt heavier with every word. The staff's steady professionalism emphasizing the reality that they had been outplayed completely. Other guests looked on quietly, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled amusement. I stayed back, calm and collected, watching them unravel. The laughter, the mockery, the sense of entitlement, they had brought it on themselves. I didn't need to raise my voice or argue. The policy, the truth, and my quiet authority spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. Blaze stomped his foot, unable to grasp that their weekend was gone. And Delaney stood frozen, her usual smirk replaced by shame. The public nature of their failure stung even more. They were no longer in control, and the realization hit them hard. Their arrogance, their cruelty, and their assumption that I was powerless had backfired completely. In that moment, I understood the full weight of quiet revenge. Sometimes the strongest punishment is letting people face the consequences of underestimating you. Right in front of everyone they expected to impress. Delaney tugged at my arm, her voice trembling, suddenly soft and unsure. "You're overreacting," she said, her usual confidence gone. For the first time that night, she wasn't laughing. Her eyes, once full of mischief and arrogance, looked small, almost desperate. I stood still, letting her words hang in the air. I had expected this moment, the pleading, the excuses, but I didn't move closer, I didn't soften. The power shift was clear, and she could feel it. All those jokes, all the mocking, all the pushes, they had led to this moment. She tried again, voice lower now, almost a whisper. "Come on, it was just a weekend. You don't need to ruin everything." Her hand reached for mine, tentative, like she was trying to anchor herself. But I didn't respond. I had given everything I could quietly, carefully, and she had used it against me. This wasn't about anger anymore, it was about respect. Blaze hovered behind her, his frustration obvious, but even he seemed unsure now. The confidence they had carried like a shield all evening had crumbled. They realized that nothing I did was a reaction. They were seeing the consequences of their own actions. I looked at Delaney, calm, steady. The pleadings, the soft words, the sudden humility. It didn't change what had already happened. I had already made my choice. I had already taken control. I didn't need to punish her with words. The reality of the cancelled weekend, the lost luxury, and the humiliation she now faced was enough. Delaney's silence, the way her bravado had melted into something small and fragile, told me everything. For once, she understood that her actions had consequences. And I didn't have to do a thing to make her feel it. I looked at Delaney, calm and steady, and said exactly what needed to be said. "You said I ruin everything." I told her, my voice quiet but firm. "So I fixed it." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She wanted an argument, an apology, maybe even anger, but I gave her nothing. I had nothing left to give her but the truth. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the valet. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step measured, deliberate. Blaze opened his mouth to protest, but I ignored him. Delaney stood frozen, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. For the first time, she realized that the power she thought she held over me was gone. I reached my car, sliding into the driver's seat, and felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. All the humiliation, the jokes, the push, the laughter, it didn't matter anymore. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't begged, I hadn't lost control. I had taken everything they assumed was theirs and quietly reclaimed it. As I started the engine and drove away, I didn't look back. The hotel, the lobby full of onlookers, it all faded behind me. I felt lighter, stronger, and finally free from the weight of their cruelty. Delaney and Blaze would have their memories of the night, but the lesson was mine to keep. Walking away wasn't about pride or revenge anymore. It was about dignity, about showing that I didn't need to stoop to their level to win. I had done it quietly, calmly, and completely. And as the city lights passed by my window, I knew something important. I wasn't the joke, I wasn't weak, and I would never be underestimated again. That night, I walked away with more than my bags. I walked away with my strength and my peace. By the time Blaze and Delaney realized what had happened, the weekend they had dreamed of was completely gone. Every luxury suite, every dinner, every detail, they had no access. They scrambled, trying to find somewhere to stay, and ended up in small roadside motels miles away from the hotel. The elegance, the comfort, the plan they had counted on. It all collapsed in an instant. I watched from a distance, quietly satisfied, knowing that I hadn't needed to yell, argue, or make a scene. The consequences of their arrogance and cruelty were playing out perfectly on their own. The people who had laughed at me, mocked me, and shoved me were now facing the reality that their actions had consequences. Weeks later, Delaney called. Her voice was soft, hesitant. She said she wanted to make peace, to fix things between us. But I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The lesson had been delivered, and she had felt it. The control I had quietly taken, the dignity I had maintained, had spoken louder than any apology could. For the first time, I realized I wasn't the joke anymore. I wasn't the weak one, the one pushed aside or humiliated for the amusement of others. I was the one who had the strength to act calmly, to take control, and to show them that kindness without respect is not weakness. It can be power. The engagement weekend they had counted on, the laughter they had shared at my expense, the arrogance they had carried like a shield. It was all gone, and I walked away with nothing but my dignity intact, my quiet victory complete. For once, I wasn't just standing there while they laughed. I was the lesson they would never forget.
Some stories don't end, they follow you. If this one stayed in your mind, you know what to do.